we all kind of got the picture. This is something, when we look at this video, that we don't expect to see in this country. We think that this is something that happens in socialist countries, and it just simply doesn't happen here in America. And what we're seeing now is the deep state kind of putting their people out on the streets, and this is the ramifications, what we're seeing. So my speech today is going to be talking about the election and the voting process and what we can do and what's actually going on out there, so everybody's kind of aware of the latest information. So I just kind of want to start by saying that, you know, if citizens in this country commit a felony, they forfeit that right to vote. Someone that I worked with for a number of years is Dinesh D'Souza, and he was one of those who actually was targeted by the Obama administration. And when he continued to fight on this issue and get his name back, the reason he was doing this, most people thought, well, you know, he was wealthy and he just wanted to do it for, you know, self-absorbed reasons. But he did it for one simple reason, because his vote mattered, and he came to this country because he wanted to be an American. And with that came voting. And that's primarily what he did and why he fought back. And it's why President Trump, you know, pardoned him, and so now he'll be able to actually participate here in the 2018 midterms. So, you know, the ultimate right for being an American is that right to vote, and to know that you're going to be governed by those that the majority of Americans have voted for. There are increasing cases of voter fraud taking place across this country. I mean, most people think that it's a very small number, but it's happening in other ways. And so what does this mean for the 2018 elections? While the mainstream media would like to talk about the Russia situation, it's more likely than not it's actually China who's been interfering in our elections. And that, you know, they're going to continue to campaign on this to discourage voters from going to the ballot box. And a lot of these voters are young voters, and as the candidate just before me spoke, I mean, these are new voters, and they're discouraged when they see that the Democrat Party is putting out there that, you know, Hillary Clinton, you know, undermined in essence, you know, Bernie Sanders, whether we agree or disagree with them. It's you know, getting involved in the system, and young people are being turned off by it. So what is America now doing to look at this voter fraud that's taking place? Well, I think a lot of us know that we do, in much of the country, they use electric ballot boxes. And those electric ballot boxes are attached to Wi-Fi's. And if everybody has a Wi-Fi, and you ladies here are very, very up on all the latest news, it's open for hacking. So this is the concern that we need to be worried about with our voter integrity, is that countries like China, who are now openly saying that they do not like the President of the United States because he is going to actually start, you know, making sure that our trade deals align much more with Americans and not necessarily what the Chinese people need. And they figure that, you know, they're going to lose money, which they will. So, you know, this is a way for them to change the system, and they're doing it actively, and many countries are trying to do this actively. So a couple weeks ago, there was a organization that in Las Vegas, and they're considered like the white hat hackers, which means they're doing it for the good guys, and they were challenged at their annual meeting to see if they could hack into the election machines in America that we use. And using Apple computers, which I use, they were able to break into it and change it in only minutes.
Wow.
Minutes. And so, I mean, and this one hacker came. His name is Mr. Sherman. He said, you know, I can turn it on and off. I can read the information stored within the ballot, and I feel like I could change votes easily. That's crazy. How can an outside group do this? You know, California, being run primarily by Democrats, even the state secretary of state here, Alex Padilla, he he watched this though, and he did say that he appreciated that the United States was spending $340 million to secure these machines. And the U.S. Department of Homeland Security is also out working in front, trying to work with these white hacker groups and to ensure that this threat is taken seriously. A lot of people will question because Donald Trump is being undermined by some in his own party. They worry that this is going to be something that he should watch out for. I agree, and I think all of us here agree that electing a president, electing your representatives, whether it's local, state, or federal, is very important and a cornerstone for democracy. Yeah. Vice President Mike Pence often, he's kind of in the shadows he follows the president around, and obviously President Trump has the big voice. But he came out a couple weeks ago in New York, and he actually said that he's going to dedicate the next few weeks to ensuring that these elections are actually accounted for and we're looking at. And he also said something very startling that caught my attention. He said, quote, "It concerns us that many states still don't have concrete plans to upgrade their voting systems, and 14 states are struggling to replace the outdated voting machines that lack paper trails and are open for hacking." That's 14 states. And when you look at who won the election, President Trump, how easily that could have gone the other direction if one of those 14 states got it wrong. And this is something that I've kind of been reporting on for a while. I think all of us want to make sure that there's no illegal votes by people showing up that aren't lawfully in the country and allowed to vote. But I think with the age of the internet, this hacking has become much more of an issue. Now, back in 2013, I was telling Paula here, I talked with I had somebody reach out to me, and he was a CIA contractor, and he told me personally that he had hard drives and data that proved that the United States intel community were the ones that interfered in the entire state of Florida election database, therefore changing the elections back in 2012. I tried as much as I could to corroborate the story back then. I could not get a corroboration. However, this year, Mr. Dennis Montgomery received whistleblower status, and being supported by Devin Nunes, who's been a warrior for us here in California, one of the few Californians that's actually going out there and doing the work for us. But so he is now able to come forward, and now I'm able to confirm the allegation that he had made. He stated that he had to sue the federal government because he kept 47 of these hard drives containing over 600 million pages of information, much of it classified, and he wanted to come forward as a whistleblower. And as a result, he's been able to expose the spy agencies that were engaged for years in systematic illegal surveillance programs of prominent Americans, including the Supreme Court Justice Chief Roberts, 156 judges, and most people will know President Trump. So how they actually got into the Florida database is, actually quite genius and very easy for them. They went into the state electoral database and they pulled all the information off and they put it on their drives. They changed the votes, did everything they wanted to do, and then put it back on their computer system, so the entire state had votes changed. And when you would go in and look at it, there would be no IP addresses to go back to, so it was very difficult for anybody to prove this case. So as you can see, this kind of system, this is not what the Democrats want coming out right before the 2018 election. And in fact, he's been muffled by a lot of different news organizations that don't want this story out, and more so by politicians of both parties. Majority of the Democrats, but there are some in the the Republican Party that don't want this message out because they're part of that big elite club. And a lot of people, we talk about this as the deep state. This report by Mr. Montgomery is when we look at changing votes. This is exactly what we worry about, and this is what we worry about with technology. And I think that we ultimately are going to look at what's the cure for this. What can we do to ensure that this doesn't happen? And many prominent experts in this matter believe that with all this technology we have, the best and simple way to go back and what for us to do is go back to paper ballots, where you Sharpie your vote, you keep a copy, and you have one member from each party at the polling station. You're not going to get the results immediately like we're used to seeing on election night. It will take longer, but they can pull up in that precinct. They can look and see, there are 4,000 registered voters in that district and they have 6,000 votes. They know something is up. So if we're really to keep the integrity at the ballot box, then this is what a number of people have said is really the best idea. And I know there's a postcard, campaign going on in that, but I'm kind of speaking out on this because as an American and as a mother of 2 children and wanting them to know what America is and that your vote does matter, it's very important that we kind of pick up the ball and kind of start running with this idea that we need to maybe go back to the past so we can have that democratic future that we all want for our kids and grandkids. So basically, I do this, and then I wanted you guys to see what's happening out there in the streets, because that is real, and that is directed towards Republicans. And as a group, it's up to all members of this country, our great nation, to ensure that we have free and fair elections. This is an idea that a lot of prominent people are talking about, and I am happy that I've been able to share this with you today. And I know a lot of you guys have questions, and I love doing the question answer part of it rather than listening to myself talk up here about this. I can do that on TV. But in any event, and we are live on Facebook, so hey Facebook, let everybody know that I'm here doing this today. So I'd like to open it up to questions and what people think about the voting process, and if you've seen anything personally and you'd like to share any stories, I'd love to see it. Yes, Paula.
I've actually had a couple people from my club, because now with the DMV motor re-registration, when they go to renew their driver's license, they've been lifelong Republicans and they get it back, and now they've been re-registered to Democrats.
Yes. And they do this at all the universities as well.
Can you repeat the question?
She said that she has a lot of friends who are lifelong Republicans, and they have been, when they go to the DMV and they get their driver's license, I'm assuming it's renewal, that they are their ballot or their preference is changed to Democrat. And I said, yes, I understand that's happening, and it's happening at the universities as well. They are registering people whether they want to or not, and the majority of them are for Democrats.
So 2 things. Number 1, check your registration. You should go to sdvote.com because you can check your registration. You can track your vote. You get the number of your ballot, excuse me, from your tag, that they give you, receipt. You can go online, track your vote, and find out when it has been counted. But you should check your registration every single election. And
more often than that. Check it out.
yes. Yes. The second thing, are you aware of an organization called Election Integrity Project?
Yes, I do, from Texas, and that's one of the...
No, it's not Texas. Well,
I think the gal that started it, and she became part of the...
that's True the Vote.
Yeah. Oh, okay, that's true.
This is something totally different.
Okay.
And so maybe we could chat about it.
Yes, absolutely.
Where's Barbara? Oh, Barbara Todd? She left. Okay. Okay, so we should just,
Yes.
talk about it. Okay.
Well, it's important at meetings like this and gatherings, because this is where the grassroots starts. And, we all saw what happened in Washington, D.C. I just got back yesterday from Washington. And we saw what happened with Kavanaugh. And we saw how far the left will go to actually disrupt what President Trump is trying to do. I mean, it's his absolute right as President of the United States to nominate Supreme Court justices, but for them to in essence take away the guilt, you're innocent before proven guilty, and this is, Paula was talking about in Brazil, it's the opposite. So it's virtually, a horrific process to go through the court system and prove yourself innocent. That's what they're trying to do, and they're trying to tar this. But I also told Paula when I came back, there were a number of women, even in DC, as liberal it is out there were a number of women who were so appalled by what the left had done at this, and said that this is going to set back women who actually are victims, and they're not going to want to come out because they're going to see a process like this unfold. So, if there's any positive to come out of that, he's sitting at the Supreme Court today, which is a good thing for this country. And B, it has energized Republicans across the country that this election is really, really important. So, okay.
I believe that in California, there's a big push to go to mail ballot.
Yes.
Only there's even advertisements on it. And I noticed when I worked the poll last time that there was a lot of people who had their status switched to mail ballot.
And
I didn't know about it. What is your opinion on the integrity of the mail
well,
ballots?
I mean, I think that would be kind of a twofold situation, because we do have people that are perhaps in nursing homes and things, so they can't get out to the election polling place or their local precinct. So there's got to be things in place for those people so they can vote as well. But I'm a firm believer that we all, when we go to the ballot box, we all ought to be showing our ID. I mean, it's silly to not. I mean, there's an argument that people can't get an ID. Well, then how do they have bank accounts, and how do they even get, whatever it may be? You have to, I mean, you walk into a federal building in Washington, D.C., you have to have a valid ID, otherwise you're not going in. So I think that's kind of a silly argument. And I think that having people do that is going to, make them think twice before they commit any kind of election fraud. We do want 100% participation in this country. We never get anywhere near that, but we do have to ensure that people who aren't able to get there, I think there needs to be some stricter guidelines when it comes to that. If you're an able-bodied person, you should be able to go down to your local precinct and vote.
Definitely. I love the idea of going back to the paper ballots. My suggestion is, I don't know who you suggest these things to, would be on your paper ballot, you put your thumbprint on when you sign in, you put your thumbprint next to your name.
Yeah.
And if there's ever a question about someone's vote, that's how it's.
Okay, well, the question was that, we should put our fingerprints on our ballots. Now, that's a very curious question, because the United States actually wrote the Constitution in Afghanistan, and has written it for many other countries. And that's exactly what they have to do in those other countries to vote. And they have like 85% of their population voting. And we all know that people dip their finger in ink and they walk around and they can't get it off for a week or so. That's how we're proposing other nations conduct their election cycles, and we're like, well, you could vote. We're not asking for ID. I mean, I know when I go, I try to show my ID, and they're like, don't show me. We're not allowed to ask. I'm like, I do that now on purpose because, to be honest about it, I do that because I like to see, what they're going to do with this. But we're encouraging other countries to, ensure that the integrity of their voting process is held to a high standard. Why are we not doing that in this country? And I think as this country becomes more and more partisan, that measures like this need to be in place for us. And it's very tough when I'm a member of the media, and when I'm in Washington D.C., I'm part of the 7%, 8% of the journalists who actually discuss conservative issues and talk about all sides of the story. And I get a lot of pushback for doing this, and I'm called a racist. And I said, well, if that's being a racist, then I guess I'm a proud racist to be, a member of the party that I believe. But it's so toxic in newsrooms that it's very, very difficult for people to to kind of, understand across the country what's happening inside the Beltway. And I think also I was talking to Paula that, I talked about the CIA and how they're getting involved in these elections, and that, it's common knowledge that in newsrooms across the country, there are a number of intel operatives that are actually employed as editors and newsroom directors. And that's how they're getting their narrative and their side of news out. And this has been happening since World War II. It's nothing new. But it's just the population is not aware of that. And you in the newsroom are not even sure which person or two are in the newsroom giving this information. But it's important for all of us to have our voices heard. And as much as I get a lot of flack from it and hate mail and threats and things, I still keep at it because I believe this country. And, I want this to be the best country in the world, and I want to give it to my children and grandchildren where it started for me. So we have to be on top of this, and unfortunately, it's the Republicans that got to stay on top of it, so.
I have a question about driver's license now. Are they giving driver's license to illegals?
Yes, they are.
Okay, so when they're voting, they could just use, are they different than?
Yeah, they do look different. It's not exactly, but if you go to a polling place, I mean, the people there probably wouldn't even know which one is legal or not.
And I also noticed, because I did work for the polls last election, there was a lot of, like the last 30 minutes, people just let it in with mail-in ballots, and they were filling them out there at the time. They didn't speak no English whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, I think we can blame our legislators for allowing this. I know 25 years ago, or maybe a little bit longer, that when immigrants came to this country, even from Mexico, Central America, they were insulted to take welfare or benefits. They wanted to work and find their way in this country. They were grateful to be in this country and participants in America. And that has shifted, unfortunately. You're seeing, a lot of them, and we've made it easy by not having them learn English, and by going to the DMV and having the test in multiple languages, having the voting, you go to the polling places and there's how many different languages you can choose from. What that does is it takes from the fabric of this country and takes from everybody being a part of this process and wanting to be Americans first. And it used to be where you had to give up your citizenship of the country you came from. And they aren't doing that any longer. So they have allegiance to their home countries. And that is also part of the problem that we have here with, inclusion and everybody kind of mixing in and wanting to be Americans first. So, one more. Okay, there you go.
I just attended the election integrity workshop yesterday from 1:30 to 4:30, and Ruth Weiss does an excellent job. And there are many, many new state laws that have been enacted since last year, and it's going to raise your eyebrows when you find out what they're able to do without signing or seeing all these ballots that are coming in. So my position is I would highly recommend that every club have a person attend that workshop, because they need to share that well with their membership. It's frightening.
It is. It really is. And this country was built on democracy, and it's up to us to kind of fight to keep it, get back to it. And sometimes the simplest things, we all have our iPhones and computers and all that, and it's much easier to do that process. But on something so important as elections, it's important that maybe we go back to the past and go back to the pen and paper and ensure that our elections are accounted for properly. Thank you very much. And if you guys have any questions, I'll stay out here and answer questions.